Do not get the Achilles repair surgery if you don't intend to recover like a pro athlete. I said what I said. Well, hello everyone. It's been a minute. We are now 18 weeks post surgery. It's been 8 weeks of PT, and it's been 8 weeks without the boot. It's been 8 weeks of walking without the boot. Learning to walk again has been interesting. But before I get into all of that, this is one thing I want to say. Do not get the Achilles repair surgery if you don't intend to recover like a pro athlete. I said what I said. Here's why I say that. I'm not a pro athlete. I don't even consider myself an athlete anymore. I'm just an active person. And I don't have pro athlete money. But there are resources that I have, thankfully, and it's a privilege to say this, that I am utilizing as much as I can to help in the recovery. And the recovery takes place outside of physical therapy. Physical therapy is part of it, but it's not the only thing. You have to do the work outside of that, which is why I said at the very beginning of this process, of this journey, that I chose surgery because I wanted to return to an active life. I, however, knew that the recovery would be the hardest part. What happens when I'm not at my PT once a week, because I only do PT one time a week now. That's been the schedule since the very beginning, because I have already put in work as far as having a base level of strength, and doing those things outside of physical therapy have been a benefit to me. So I open that statement, or I openly say that, knowing what I know, that this is going to take the time it takes. And fortunately for me, thus far, my recovery has been more or less pretty boring. I have my frustrations, which I will share, but it is part and parcel, as Jamaicans would say, for the course of recovery. So I want to share, first of all, a couple of things that I don't see spoken about enough with all the Achilles recovery videos I've seen. I'm going to share a couple things from my own experience that I've seen. And these are things I don't see talked about enough, or if they have been, somewhere hidden in a video. The first thing is, they tell you that the risk of nerve damage or irritation when you're doing a surgery, it's one of the risks that they tell you. And most people, like myself, don't think that you will experience that. What I have experienced isn't nerve damage, but I've yet to have the full feeling return to my foot. On the outside of my foot, it still feels as if it's wearing off from being numb. So even though I can't feel my fingers or anything on my foot, there's still the sensation that my foot is slightly numb. And that is a side effect or a risk from doing the surgery. That's what it looks like in real time. And I don't know, I asked the surgeon when that would wear off or when the feeling will come back. They do not know. They can't guarantee that. It may or may not come back. So that's something I want you to bear in mind. Or maybe you've experienced that yourself. Let me know. Second thing, learning how to walk again. Coming out of the boot. It's not just returning to business as usual. You might think it is, but that time that you spent in a boot, the time you spent not bearing weight, your brain kind of let go, and the body, that muscle memory thing that I talk about, is real. At the same time, your brain also associates the movement with pain, because you remember when you're in the boot, you remember post-surgery what that pain felt like every time you move your foot. When you took your foot out of the boot, what that felt like, the pain you may have experienced from that, and that pain stays top of mind. So you kind of have to retrain your brain to retrain your body to get used to walking again. And as much as you think that you're just returning to walking, that limping becomes kind of innate. So you have to retrain your brain and retrain your body to walk, which is why PT is important, because I thought I was going back to walking normally, and my PT had to kind of reinforce the steps or my gait in a very slow way for me to retrain. And even then, I still have to consciously make the effort to walk in a certain way as a way of retraining my brain that my foot is healed and that I'm back to normal. Of course, you are going to deal with pain post coming out of the boot and going back to walking. Speaking of walking, you can't go from 0 to 100. Ask me how I know. First time coming out of the boot, yes, celebration. Feels like you can. I felt like I can now go for more walks. But I will tell you this, 5 minutes was the max I could manage. 10 was the max. That's if I push myself, and even then, it became painful. And once that pain started to increase, then it started to move up. So for me, that meant more limping. For me, that also meant things like my back pain. Back and hip pain, especially if you have a history of those things, will flare back up once you come out of the boot. In fact, before you even get out of the boot, the fact that you've been unbalanced with that boot, the air boot, or if you've been in a cast, and just that period of time walking unevenly is going to trigger or may trigger back and hip pain that you had previously. I had a back injury, or I had a history of back pain, and that came back with a vengeance, almost to the point where it felt like I was starting from scratch again, mostly with the hip pain and then the back pain. So as a result of that, my PT wasn't focused solely on my foot. It also then went back to also concentrating on my hip and my low back, but also they're all connected, because if one side I'm not using as much, then the other side of my body is going to compensate, and that compensation is going to drive misalignment and pain in the area that is being overworked or underworked, as the case may be. So that is also a reality of post Achilles surgery. Speaking of PT, your PT session, which I have said before, don't start and end the 1 hour you go to PT for. The PT homework that you get, you have to do it. You have to do it in the morning, you have to do it in the evening, you have to do it when you go to the gym. I choose to do mine every morning when I go to the gym, because otherwise, honestly, it's cold. I won't get downstairs necessarily. So what I do, I'll keep a band upstairs and a small kettlebell that will allow me to do some aspect of it. When I go to the gym, it's the first thing I do before I even get to any kind of warm-up. And then because I have my back and hip pain to consider as well, or the rehab for that as well, then that extends my rehab before I even lift up a weight or even start the warm-up, which is like walking on the treadmill. So PT is an ongoing thing. Staying in tune to your body is an ongoing thing. You don't just come out of the boot and say, "Hey, throw your hands up, yeah, I am healed and ready to go," which is why I opened by saying, if you are not prepared to rehab like a pro athlete, don't do the surgery. Okay? All right. Speaking of healing and recovery, it is, in my opinion, better to be very conservative than to be aggressive. Again, I'm not a pro athlete. Again, I'm not trying to get back to a sport in particular, but even if I was, there would be some kind of pressure to get back to it. That said, knowing what I know, the experiences that I've had, I, for one, would continue to be conservative. And I have been conservative, so much so that my PT had to kind of push me to say, "Hey, let us try something and let's give you a little harder, because you are already ahead of where one would expect me to be at the stage that I have been at or was at." So it's better to be conservative than to rush to get back to your sport or to doing things normally. Getting back to normal, whatever normal was for you, is going to take some time, which is also why I said in my earlier videos that it's going to take the time it's going to take. In fact, I want to say strap up or strap in for the year-long journey. 9 months to a year journey before normalcy is actually normal. When it comes to getting back to your activity, so if you hike, if you walk a lot, if you go to the gym, if you run, those types of things, like I said, be conservative in the healing. Don't try to rush. So for one, I'm not trying to rush back into running. I didn't do a lot of running, but I would do maybe a once a week kind of running. I've not done any runs. In fact, I didn't really start walking on the treadmill at an increased speed until maybe a week, I want to say week 12. And getting back into the gym for me, however, was something, as you may know from my previous videos, is something that never really stopped. With the exception of the 2 weeks after the injury happened and the 2 weeks post-surgery, I have been in the gym, which is also what's helping me heal and recover a little faster. I might have modified everything, heavily modified at first, and now that I can bear weight, I am pushing a little bit more, testing certain limits, but also working within certain limits. For example, I'm not trying to put a heavy amount of weight on my back. In fact, right now, because I'm also dealing with hip and low back flare-ups, I take on all form of back squat or weight that I need to bear on my shoulders off. So I have moved down into, lower chain type stuff or open chain type stuff, like doing leg presses or belt squats or hip thrusts, that type of thing. Goblet squats, for example, lunges, those types of things, in addition to taking the pressure off of my back and preventing some of that compression that's been happening. It's also helping me work on unilateral or bilateral, but it's really unilateral. I'm working on one side at a time, and that is how I'm going to strengthen some of those muscles that were made weak from being in the boot and being inactive for those couple of weeks. So getting back into the gym has been slow. Getting back into the gym has been steady. It didn't stop. It's been modified, and each week or every couple weeks I make some change that is pushing me a little bit more, testing my capacity, testing my limits a little bit more, and for that it's been working. It's also translated into me walking more or having more walks in my day, being able to keep up with my dog on dog walks now. I will say at the start, walking would create like swelling in your foot. So like once that boot comes off, you're still gonna have some residual swelling from being on your foot for any extended period of time. And for me, that was like if I was on my feet for more than, I'd say, 3 hours, 2 hours it started, and then it was like 2 hours first and then 3 hours. I would have significant pain and swelling such that I would have to put my foot up in the evenings. So eventually the swelling kind of went away, and eventually I didn't have that much pain. I would still have some pain if I stood or stayed standing for extended periods of time. So I break that up throughout the day. So getting back to my activity is slow, is steady, it's also a progression. It's not going from doing nothing to suddenly doing everything. I have yet to do any form of jumping. I've yet to do any form of running, and I suspect I will be trying that maybe in another couple of weeks, just to see. When I go back to my PT this week, we'll reassess. I think, yeah, we're at week 12, so we'll reassess. Modifying your workouts early and often, that bears repeating, because even though you are healing or progressing, you're gonna have days, especially if you're a woman, and if you're a woman over a certain age. If you're a woman over 40, that even applies more, because you don't just have, say, a menstrual cycle to deal with. You also have changing hormones that are happening with being in perimenopause, if you are. So that complexity adds complexity to the situation and requires due diligence. It requires discernment. It requires listening to your body, paying attention to what's happening, paying attention to what's happening outside of your body. So what's happening in your life, stress, things that, sleep, hydration, nutrition, paying attention to those things does impact recovery and your ability to handle, day-to-day things. Just because you take the boot off and you can walk doesn't mean you pick up where you left off immediately. That bears repeating. Now, when it comes to the resources, this is what I mean. If you have health insurance, then you work with the PT that you can. Follow the PT exercises religiously. So that means getting little mini bands that you can work on at home, using a small weight to add weight to the leg when you need to do calf raises. Using stairs, for example. One of the exercises I have to do is doing a step down, which works on mobility of my ankle. I have stairs in my house, so that's an automatic exercise that I do every day, but most days I will spend a few minutes to intentionally do the repetition so that I am increasing that mobility as I go along. And this is outside of the PT sessions. When I go to PT sessions, and I get the manual therapy as well. I've done blood flow restriction therapy, and I've done cupping. Cupping is very painful. I've yet to go for a proper massage because I was waiting until I hit that 4-month mark, because I have a lot of adhesions that have built up in my calf, and it's been painful to work on myself. So I have been trying to do some trigger point myself, and it's painful. So I have more of that to do, but also to schedule with a massage therapist to get some of that work done. Doing regular stretching outside of going to therapy. Again, this is all outside of therapy. That recovery, it's making sure I'm doing the band exercises every morning. It's making sure I'm doing my decompression exercises at night. That's for the low back and the hip. It's making sure that I'm drinking enough water so my tendons stay supple. It's paying attention to things like crackly knees. Prior to my injury, my knees used to crack quite a bit, but then when I changed my strength training strategy, or when I went back to traditional strength training and been working on a program diligently since 2023, that pain and crackly sound in my knees disappeared. If not, it became silent. I don't know if it's because I tuned it out or because it actually did, but I think it's because the knees got stronger and I was loading more weight and doing all of those things. When this injury happened, or after the injury and after surgery, and I started getting back into walking and stuff, I'm hearing my knees again, in addition to I'm also feeling some knee tight, some pain that's due to tightness of the muscles. So again, an indicator that I need to get back into some massage therapy. If you have access to acupuncture, take advantage of that as well. Sleep is important, and supplementation. These are also addressed in the post-surgery nutrition video. You can check that out. Again, connect with your dietitian or registered nutritionist for further assistance around nutrition. Specifically, if you have a practitioner that you have a good relationship with, also please connect with them, because it's important for you, especially if you're a woman over 40. Then these are things to consider. You have a lot more working, not against you, but you have a lot more to consider than just eating protein and making sure you take a fiber supplement, because you have other blood markers that you might be looking at. In my case, I had other issues that I needed to pay attention to that weren't issues before. So working with my primary care physician to resolve those things. So your recovery is not just one thing, it's a host of things, and it takes time. So these are my thoughts 18 weeks post-op, and I just wanted to share them with you. But I also wanted to say that it's going to take the time it takes, and the time flies, because who would have thought that I'm here at 18 weeks post-surgery, more or less getting back to normal. I have a long way to go. I still haven't been able to do certain things, but I am closer to doing them than I was 3 months ago. So there's hope. There is a process if you follow it. Build a team. I want to say that if you can, build a team. And that's what I mean by using the resources that you have available to you. I have the resources. I don't have pro athlete money where I have all these gadgets and all these things, but what I do have, I'm taking full advantage of, and that's the point. Take full advantage of what you do have access to. So don't just do the surgery and go sit down and say, oh, I'll get back to walking. You make it worse. Do this. If you do the surgery and then have a plan to recover, have that plan, a year-long plan at the minimum, to aid your recovery. Well, that is all I gotta say on all of this. If you're gonna do the surgery, let me know what questions you have. If you've done the surgery, I want to know what challenges that you face. How can I help? And maybe I can point you in some direction that you would find useful. Okay? Thanks for watching. Tune in for the next one. Bye.